Hi guys, welcome back to Big Fish Sink or Swim. I am your co-host Maya.
And I'm Carmen J. Carroll, and this is the episode Genius Generation, and we're so excited.
Yes.
First of all, for season 2, but also for our very first guest.
Yes, our
this season.
First guest of season 2. Super excited. We work very closely with this person, but I want to allow her the opportunity to introduce herself because her resume is so long. I've seen it, but she's doing lots of dope shit in the creative space, specifically the digital marketing space. So we thought that it would be an amazing opportunity to bring her on Big Fish, and we can talk about the amazing things that she's doing. Being that we're all Black creatives here trying to create space for other Black creatives. So thought that this was a perfect opportunity to kick off season 2. So Maia Regman, please take this opportunity to introduce yourself.
My Maya sister, thank you for the intro. My name is Maia Regman. I'm also known as Maia the Mogul. You can also follow me at Maya_melanin, MAIA, the best way to spell it. But who am I? I'm a content creator. I've been in marketing and communications for about 6 years now, and it's crazy to even be saying that. Like, it's something that when I started at 16 doing a whole bunch of remote internships, I was like, okay, I know that once I'm older, I want to be able to really be doing this for real. But like, now that I'm doing it for real, I'm like, oh wow, okay, cool. And what doing it for real looks like is I've been featured in The Shade Room, Essence, Refinery 29, Unbothered. I've had my work featured in Adweek and Genius and several other publications, and it's amazing to say that at such a young age. I specialize in teaching my audience how to support creatives and how creatives can support themselves and finding softwares and tools to help them polish their work, as well as empowering entrepreneurs and specifically solopreneurs, specifically small business owners, specifically Black-owned businesses, and helping them connect them to audiences that will actually support them, because it is very hard to gain that traction, especially in the era of people want to be kind of Gucci down, but they don't want to exactly give that same support to our local businesses. So those are the things that I specialize in. I'm so glad to talk to y'all about it.
Yes, we're super excited to have you here, Maya. When I first met, we met through our job that we have outside of our side hustles. So I was super excited to work with Maya because 1, same name, 2, same spelling, 3, another Maya Aquarius. I feel like that's super important to know.
Alignment.
Hello.
Okay, very much so aligned.
Very much so aligned. So I'm super excited to have the opportunity to chat with you and have everybody else hear you and hear your story, because I think you're doing amazing shit, as I mentioned before. One thing that I've noticed when I first met you, and you alluded to also, is the fact that you've been doing this for so long, even though you're so young.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah. So what sparked in your mind at a young age? Okay, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to dedicate my time to, and build my brand on.
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think a lot of it is that it's a similar story to what inspires a lot of Black creatives to be Black creatives. It's seeing your family struggle in jobs that they're not happy in. And I saw that generational issues of people not being able to work in the fields that they wanted, and kind of were just forced to do what they could and get the 9 to 5 and go to work and come back. And I did not want that for myself. I saw how exhausted my mom was being a nurse, how exhausted my dad was working in retail. And I was like, okay, are you guys passionate about it? And that wasn't really the answer. The answers that I got weren't really what I was looking for.
Right.
And I think I mean, I was only 16 when I made the decision, so I wasn't as well versed as I am in like things like, you know, thrive mindset versus survival mindset. But I definitely can see how that has been a pattern in my family, and I think in a lot of creative families where it is hard to decide that you want to do something that nobody in your family has done. Like nobody in my family is in marketing or communications or anything along those lines. Like everybody went to school for something, and exactly what they went to school for is what they decided to pursue. So for me, it was kind of hard explaining at the age of 16 when we didn't even have the word influencers yet. It was just like bloggers. But I was like, I see that this is a space that I can start in. This is a space where they will actually hire me, even though I'm only 16, because people have always recognized that Gen Z is the future of the internet. So if I could get an internship or remote internship, several remote internships, that's what I ended up doing in high school, in, you know, in marketing and communications and event planning and all the things that I felt I was probably going to need once I got older, then I felt like I was going to set myself up. And I wanted to be able to do that, especially because I think it's an Aquarius thing. Just knowing that I had a lot of interests, but not necessarily knowing what exactly my zhuzh was going to be.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me just get a whole bunch of general things under my belt, and then from there we should be able to really get something popping. So thankfully that is what happened. I mean, being at Groove right now and being an account director is like very easily the type of job that I wanted. I didn't know what Groove was when I was 16, but if you would have told me, I was like, oh yeah, for sure.
Right, definitely. And I feel like that is something that we all could relate to. Something about trying to find your own path when it comes to your career, not doing something that your parents necessarily would want you to do, no matter what it is. That's something that I think we all had to struggle with. So for you, when you first decided, okay, I'm going to go down the path that I haven't seen anybody else gone down before, what is your first step? Like, what's the first thing in your mind to do going down this path? Because I feel like that's definitely something that would be helpful for other folks that may be veering off into new career paths.
Absolutely. The first thing that I would say to do is like get whatever you need on paper so that people can't question you. And that's something that I started at like very early. I don't really know what kind of clicked in my head, but I was like, I feel like if I get certificates and stuff, people can't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. So Google Analytics, I highly recommend to any person that wants to get started in digital marketing. Spot has so many certifications, literally dozens of certifications that you could get in marketing, social media, and public relations. Like, get certified so that people know that you know what you're talking about. It's put me in a lot of rooms that I wouldn't have been in otherwise, because I could say that I had skills, and you can't question Google. You can't question HubSpot. You can question an 18-year-old, but you can't question them. So that's the first thing that I'd recommend. Like, I think a lot of people want to get started in the traditional way of like internships and volunteering, and that's great, but we have to remember that we are moving into this new economy that our parents didn't have, where it's really skill based. Like, people will ask you, what are your skills, before they ask you what school you went to, what classes were relevant. So it's incredibly important to have those like certificates and like that actual stuff that's going to back you. And also just understand generally, like, what do you specifically bring to the table? For me, I know that a driving point is my audience and how long I've been in this space. So people aren't paying people who have similar followings to me, that like you know, quote unquote micro influencers, the same amount as people who have probably triple my size, if you can't tell what your analytics are. And that's something that's very important. Like, you literally have to be able to argue for yourself, because Black influencers get paid less, Black content creators get paid less, Black artists, photographers, like every single Black creative, unless you know how to demand your worth, you're not going to get it. So also know who you are and what your unique skill set is.
That's such a good oh, go ahead, Carmen. That's
no. I was just gonna say, on the point of certifications. Wow. I could not get that. I could not figure it out. But on that point, I'm on job number 2, and I have yet to be asked, where's my degree? Like, it was on my resume, of course, and of course I went to school, y'all, because I have to say that. But they have yet to add, because like at the end of the day, it's like you said, like your skills, they're looking like, at the end of the day, businesses, orgs, partnerships. They want to satisfy their bottom line, and they just need to know that you can do that. And so, yes, while like having a degree is good, your skills is what's going to get you to that like finish line.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting that you brought that up, Carmen, because that was sort of leading to my follow-up question for Maia, which is, as somebody who knew what they wanted to do since 16 and pursued opportunities to develop those skill sets, why did you find it important to still go to college? Because a lot of people would say that the point of college is to find out what you want to do and to develop those skill sets, but you sort of started doing that before college. So you technically, somebody would argue that you didn't have to go, but you obviously made that conscious decision to still go. So I'm curious to hear, despite having your following, despite having some skills under your belt, what encouraged you to still go?
I would say 100% hands down the network. Like
Mm.
for me, Howard University was the only HBCU that I applied to. And that wasn't because I had anything against HBCUs. I was paid for my application, so that was part of it. But the other part was also I knew that I wanted to be a business management major, and I knew that I needed to graduate with the business degree because I was like, regardless of this marketing and the social media stuff that I wanted to do, I know that there's such a huge pay gap between marketing and like every other business major. And a huge reason why is because people just don't take it seriously. So I was like, I'm just gonna have to get this business administration degree so that people can take me seriously, regardless of if I go down the communications route. It's something that I have to do. And I'm glad that I did it because it put me in so many programs and event spaces I never would have been in if I said that I was any other major than management. Because people already were not really trying to take business majors seriously if you're in the communication space. They assume that you don't know anything about analytics, or you might not know about campaigns. And it's like, no, like really, as a business major, even at Howard, despite a lot of people knowing me, a lot of people thought I was in school of communications because I made sure that all of my work still followed that path. And that's what I'm so thankful for my Howard experience for, was that it really truly did not matter what your major was. As long as you knew what you cared about, there were opportunities on campus for you to be able to seek that out and then get connected to the network that you needed and be connected to specifically the Black professionals that you needed to look up to, that were going to mentor you. Like a lot of my business savvy and business acumen does not come from anything I learned in class, but it came from the people that I met in my business fraternity, Alpha Kappa Psi. It came from professors that really, like, you know, I might have just been chopping it up with in office hours just to talk, just to key, kind of trying to get, you know, a higher grade, but it wasn't things that I was formally learning. Like, this is just stuff that I was learning on the fly. And it was even down to like my resume. So many of the crazy opportunities that I got, like for example, being a consultant when we had the the former FBI director James Comey came to campus. He had a lecture series, and it made the news because Howard booed him the entire time. The entire speech. I think his speech was like maybe 40 or 50 minutes. Okay.
As they should.
And administration didn't know what to do. And I'm a freshman. I'm just like, oh, this is crazy, holding it up, like recording and posting it on Twitter. Like, this is wild. And because I had this connection to like student voice, people, like, I got asked by administration, like, can you help us at least get students to listen? And I was like, I could try. And I tried and it worked. But like things like that teach you like crisis management when you're like 18. And it's things like that I knew I wasn't going to get at the other schools that I applied to, simply because they're just not Howard. And it's not no shade. It's just that there aren't crises happening at every turn. And like, it's funny too, because they always say like Howard prepares you for the real world, but it's like now being my real world and like my big girl job, like I'm like, oh yeah,
it did.
Yeah, it did. I'm
Did.
feeling pretty prepared. Like,
yeah.
So that's a huge reason why I still went to school. I feel like even though like my entire time, I kind of was like, do I have to be here? Like, and most of that mostly was just coming from like, again, like Carmen said, like you get these jobs and these interviews and they're not asking you for your degree. Like oftentimes I even have clients that I've got, because I also do communications consulting. I even have clients that will ask me, oh Maya, like how's XYZ going? And they don't realize that like I just left school, like just happened. Like
Right.
I had a conversation with the client that I've had for like over a year now, and he thought that I had graduated when I met him. So it's like oftentimes people just want to make sure that you're meeting the bottom line, like she said. Like, are
Right.
you getting the job done? Yes.
Right.
Okay. So it doesn't even matter your age. It doesn't matter the degree. It just matters, do you have the skills and can you get it done?
Right. Absolutely. I feel like there's this wave of folks who sort of want to, I don't want to necessarily say be influencers, but want to monetize off of their own brand. Do you feel like anybody and everybody is capable of building a brand and monetizing off of it?
It's a
Or
on the surface, yes.
let me be more specific, turning themselves into a brand specifically, like building their own, like, because you are a brand, right? Like you have followers, like you have folks that connect with you to because you have influence, and they want their product out there, or they want their mission out there, etc. Do you feel like personally that any and everybody can do that?
On the surface, yes. Like in terms of like, is it a process? Could I give you the handbook? Could I give you the manual? Yes. Is everybody going to follow it? No. And I think that that's something that people aren't as transparent about in the industry, because there's a lot of social media coaches and branding coaches that will give you the tutorials, and they're on Instagram with the reels, and they're like, all you need to do to make $100,000 this month, like this week, I can get you $6 million if you do these five
That's
things
harassment.
pointing to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if it's that simple. And I think a lot of it is that people don't realize that it's truly a lifestyle. It's, and not to be like, you know, you have to start your day with the iced coffee. Like that's not the case at all. But what it comes down to is like, to be an influencer, you have to have an audience. And to have an audience at the very basic level, it's not about entertainment, it's about information, because that's what keeps people following you. So do people feel fulfilled when they read something that you post? Do people feel engaged? Do people feel invited? Do people feel like they're a part of your story? And that's the part that a lot of people don't get. They think, you know, just because you have the pretty aesthetic, people are going to follow you. People might follow you, and then after a couple of posts that gave them nothing, they're going to unfollow. Like if they see that every post that you post on your story is not something that they necessarily care to watch, they're going to stop watching. And even as the algorithm starts to change and evolve, it's starting to pick up on things like that. So I know that I didn't do well on my story because I didn't post myself first.
Right.
And it's things like that where it's like, that's what you know when you have an audience. Like if I'm not posting something that is actually educational or informational to my audience, I'm probably just not gonna post it, because I know that it's not worth it to them.
Right.
And I think, especially as a micro influencer or a small content creator, advice I would give anybody who's starting is you have to be authentic in what do you give and what are you uniquely kind of like a subject matter expert in, or can become a subject matter expert in. Because if people don't know you for something, then they simply won't associate you with anything. And that's the biggest issue when people say like, oh, you know, all of a sudden she acted like she an influencer now. Like all of a sudden it's hashtag sponsored. Oh, now she's trying to collab with this or that person. Like I hear a lot of that criticism sometimes, and it's not necessarily that people like thought that they had something and they're not. It's more so that you have to understand that there's kind of like a retraining that you have to do with your audience. And I know about that uniquely because I had to do that like times 10 when COVID hit.
Right.
Because I was caring for myself, like wasn't supported by family, wasn't talking to family, nothing. So it's March. I just got kicked off of campus after being an RA. Now I got to figure out how I'm paying rent, how I'm paying groceries, like everything. And I literally sat and I wrote out what I needed to do for like the next year of making sure that my audience knew me, trusted me, took me seriously, would, you know, I'll be able to convert people into clients, convert people into customers of the brands that I was working with. And that takes a lot of effort. Like, it's not as simple as, oh, I just posted and I went. Like, are you engaging with the people in your comments? Are you making sure that you're responding to people's stories? Are you like, it's so much more than just like looking pretty on the gram. And I think that's the part that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, and to that point,
Mhm.
and Carmen, I definitely want you to jump in here. I was just gonna say, to that point of it being a lifestyle, I can honestly, I'm not an influencer at all, but I can speak to the fact that it's true. Just for the simple fact that, like, for my day job working at the company that we all work at, I obviously do HR, and one of the things that we've heard, are folks coming to us and asking us if they can be removed from projects that is specifically related to creating content because of how exhausting creating content is. And people don't realize, like, the schedule that you have to make for yourself to create content in order to do it in a way that makes sense based off of your, like, regular day-to-day schedule, like editing the content, thinking about when it's appropriate to post, just thinking about staying up to date on the algorithm changes is all, like, a job in itself. And to your point, I don't think people realize how exhausting that can be. But Carmen, definitely want you to chime in.
No, honestly, I second everything. And I think I'm okay with the fact that, like, yeah, I got my little followers or whatever, but my page is for me. And if I don't feel like doing a reel, I'm not gonna do a reel. If I'm not, like, so I think I'm settled in the fact that, like, I know how to manage my social media and other social media to the point where I can, get them the followers or whatever. Like, I'm content in that, because I posted a reel, I want to say like maybe 2 months ago, and I had a little bit of armpit hair, and then somebody was like, "Is that armpit hair?" I went into retirement. I was like, I can't. I was like, I can't do this because I'm too sensitive. I'm too sensitive. First of all, I was like, yes, it is. Like, okay. So yeah, now I'm like, I'm content with, helping other people build their brands, and I know how to do it, and I have that under my belt. But as far as me doing it, I just want my page to be for me. And if people are rocking with that, that's cool. If not, go on to Big Fish. That's where we give you our information, what's trending, the news, blah blah blah. But on my page, you're just gonna get me and whatever I want to give you.
That's actually really hilarious, one. But two, I think that's a really good distinction. Like, how do you determine wanting to do social media work and wanting to be in front of the camera? 'Cause those are two different things. So how did you know, Maya, what you do a little bit of both? So how did you know that you felt comfortable enough, or to expose your life and be vulnerable on social media?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question as well, because it's a great point that Carmen makes, where it really is putting yourself in a vulnerable spot. And I know for me, like, I've trained a lot of people in learning how to do social media management and, like, giving them the tools and walk them through the process. And I love educating people on the subject. And I think a lot of it for me was that I started so young that it became very natural to me. Um, I did my first campaign when I was 16, and it was with CoverGirl. So it was like, oh, this is fun. Like, okay, it's that simple. All right. Like, let me just continue to find products that I love. And it felt natural to me, because it was like, I'm just talking about what I like to do. I'm just talking about what I'm already doing. And I think that for people where that's not natural, it's hard. Like, there's a lot of things going for me that I've realized, especially since COVID hit, that it makes it a lot easier for me to want to put myself in that vulnerable position, because I already kind of do that. Like, down to, like, my personality type, I'm 100% extroverted. ESFJ. Shout out to my entertainers. We are extroverted. Like, I talk like I'm on a reality show when I'm just talking to my friends. Like, that's just my natural tone of voice. So things like that, it's easy for me to go on my story and just key and chit chat with the people if I feel like doing that, because it's not feeling like I have to do, like, a little bit extra. Like, I enjoy wearing makeup. I enjoy doing my hair or having my hair done. And I especially enjoy having my face beat with, like, black owned brands. And I especially enjoy having my hair done by anointed hairstyling in DC, who's been doing my hair for a year. So it's real easy for me to tag them and be like, okay, I'm doing, like, just got my hair done at Anointed. And then when they hit me up asking me, hey, like, do you want to be on our flyers? Or when I find out that now we're creating a Howard discount because now dozens of girls have gone just because of me, it doesn't feel as hard. And I think that that's something that, if you feel comfortable talking about your life and you feel comfortable promoting and uplifting other people, then I think it should be something that you should consider. But I think that a lot of people underestimate how hard it is to be vulnerable in those ways, because I know for me, it's a constant, it's constantly telling myself, like, I don't care. Ain't nobody gonna beat my ass.
Yeah.
Like,
Ain't nobody gonna check me.
Like, ain't nobody gonna check me. Like, there's plenty of times where, and that was something that I kind of had to learn and like get myself out of the mentality of that everything needed to be perfect. But like, if I know that I need to post 2 to 3 times a week, for example, when I was doing that, when I was posting 5 to 8 times on my story, there's gonna be something wrong. There's gonna be a typo. There's gonna be a lash out of place. There's gonna be like something's gonna be wrong. But most likely people are gonna be mad. And if they do, I just gonna block them. Like that's it. Like that is kind of that simple. And I think again, that's also easier when you already have a core group of people. Like there are some people where, for example, like for me, I was student council president in elementary and middle school and high school. I'm still connected with all those people at elementary. So like on social media rather. So it was a little bit easier for me to say I already had an audience because I genuinely already had people who were already in my comments and engaging with me.
Right.
And then I get to Howard and that's an extra $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000. Well, not dollars, I wish. But two to 3,000 to 4,000 people following me and engaging with my content. And this is another place that I'm taking up student leadership positions. And it's just things like that where it might make it a little bit easier. But like for, you know, if you're just, you know, chilling, going to school, doing your work, doing what you need to do, like it's not as simple to make that transition. And that's when you have to kind of seek out the audience that you want. And that's something that I always tell anybody who is interested truly in doing influencer work. You just need to find your audience. So whether that means joining Facebook groups or following the followers of the people that you love to follow, like your audience is there. You just have to find it.
Yeah. So to that point, do you think that oversaturation can be a thing in this particular space?
I love that question because it's like a very like common question that I think businesses are even asking because they're now starting to realize that we've actually moved past the age of like influencer really and we're more in the age of content creator. We're more in the age of people don't necessarily care if Kim Kardashian or whatever Fashion Nova babe has on. They kind of care more about the people that they see themselves in and they see themselves represented in. And this is the time for the mid-sized fashion bloggers, and this is the time for, you know, dark-skinned women in makeup, and this is the time for people to actually connect with who they're following. So it's at the point where we kind of don't care about numbers anymore, and I love that. And I think the only thing that I want to see is now that we're having like somewhat of like a quote unquote like oversaturation, like we're having so many people enter the space, is more people who know then how to demand what they're worth. And that's the biggest concern that I have and why I'm doing a lot on my end. Like I'm working on an ebook right now, working on a course right now, but I want to educate people so that they know what numbers should you be asking for, or like, what is a media kit, or so that we're not, you know, burning ourselves out for companies. Cause like you said, the content creation process is exhausting. So how are you making sure that you're not burning yourself out for a company that paid you $20 for a post, but then they paid the white content creator with the same amount of followers as you 1,000? Like, and it's things like that that we don't have enough transparency about in this in the space, which is scary when we have so many more people entering the space. Like it's not as simple as going online and seeing what is the average salary for an influencer, because it's not that. It's engagement rates, it's formulas, it's things like that. So I just want to see more transparency. But is it oversaturated? Kind of, but all in the best ways.
Yeah. And to that point, because this is a space where you're essentially working for yourself, how do you know, without giving away too much, because I feel like this is definitely a content series in itself that you could dive into, so without giving away too much, how does one know that their self-worth or whatever the worth of their work should be changing? When do you know that it's time to be like upping the price or asking for another bag?
I would say for me, I strategically planned for when I wanted to get featured, like, and what I wanted to be featured for. And I think once you're doing the level of work that is truly noteworthy and inspiring and kind of putting yourself in the place that you needed to see for you to kind of be inspired by you, that's when you start changing your price. And for me, that was when I got featured in Essence and Refinery 29, because those were both things that I had like literally planned for, like looked up journalists, looked up what is the work that they're like highlighting, what's the type of work that I need to be doing, who are the type of like I think that people forget that it's not as simple as getting featured somewhere. Like, what are you being featured for? Like, what are you
Right.
being known for? And like, are you actually creating that content? And when at the height of COVID, I knew that I wasn't. So I was like, I need to plan about 7 different rebrands before I actually get what I want. So how do I do that? How are we going to try to make that into a content planner right now? How are we going to make that into a content calendar? Okay, I think I'm going to do this first, then I'll do this, then I'll do that, then I'll do this, and then I'll have something to actually talk about. Because you could pitch yourself to brands, you could pitch yourself to journalists, but nothing really matters unless you have something that's actually relevant and of value. So for everybody who's trying to figure out how do I bump up my price, like figure out what are you bumping them up for exactly.
That is such a good tip too, because I'm starting to think about, as I have like a press person in my life that's helping acquire press, etc., thinking about what stories or what topics you want to be associated with, because to your point, that's what the audience is then going to go to you for. So I think that folks sometimes think that speaking about everything and being in everything makes the most sense, but if you want to be known for something specific and you want to be known as a thought leader in that space, it actually is better to not go to every bag, not go to every feature, not go to everything, just have your face everywhere, but to think about what you actually want to stand for, and go about it strategically. So that's definitely a good, amazing tip that I don't think folks think about often.
Yeah. And one thing I will say just about oversaturation, because I think a lot of creators hold themselves back with like being like, oh, someone's already doing it, like I can't do it. And I said this in the Above the Noise podcast. You guys can go check them out. But I don't think there's such thing as oversaturation. I really don't. Like, should everyone do everything? No.
Right.
But I don't think oversaturation exists. I think we just pigeonhole ourselves and don't allow ourselves to like dream big enough or actually do it because of fear. But I think I use the example. I was like, Rihanna did Fenty and Savage X Fenty, even though Victoria's Secret exists, even though CoverGirl exists, even though MAC exists. Like, there's so many people who are, I mean, even Pharrell started Human Race, and it's mass skincare routines and skincare brands that already exist. So I think it's to your point of like your audience, like people associate Pharrell with timeless skin. So why wouldn't he go into the skincare brand? And whatever our feelings are, I know he might have been canceled or whatever, but my point is, like, everyone enters a space because they offer a different perspective. And like you said, like we see ourselves in Rihanna or we see ourselves in Pharrell. And this is a terrible example. Not a terrible example because she does great brand collabs, but even Saweetie with McDonald's, like I think is it healthy to like be a part of a McDonald's sponsorship?
But that's what they associate her with.
But they associate her with gluttony pretty much. So like it makes sense for her to do a McDonald's campaign. And even though Travis Scott did it, like it didn't matter. Like now we're on to Saweetie. So that's all I have to say about oversaturation. If you're a creator out there and you're like, oh, I can't do it because, oh, I'm 6 degrees separated from the girl that also does hair tutorials. Okay, but you also have something to offer. So that's what I have to say about oversaturation.
That's actually a good point, because I remember when I was rewriting my IG bio, and I looked at or I was rewriting my website bio that's linked in my IG. And I remember looking at another Black creative who does very similar work, and our missions are very like similarly aligned. So I was like, I just wonder what hers said. So after I wrote mine, I read hers, and it was like almost basically the same. So I was like, should I change it? But like, this is actually the work that I'm doing. And then I had to convince myself that like more than one Black woman can be in marketing, creating space for other Black women to step into. So you know,
and you have to think like you're entering this space because there's a need. Like okay, yes, that other person is fulfilling a need for her audience, but she can't take on the world. And that's how I felt even like with digital status, with like my branding and design, like whole shebang hustle, like I was like, oh, there's so many people who are, one, I feel like are doing it better than me, and two, who've been doing it. And I'm like, no, I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to have clients. If you build that network, they're going to have clients that they can't take on, or that they don't want to,
Right.
or
Yep.
there's going to be people who prefer to go to you because they have that connection. So yeah, to your point,
Yep.
like you were called into this space
Yeah.
because there's a need for it,
Yeah. And
and your
speaking
audience needs
of, I feel like Maya, one thing that you do amazingly is like sticking to your mission and sticking to your purpose. I think that you are very intentional about who you do like ambassador partnerships with, and you're very intentional about the brands that you promote on your IG story or on your grid. How difficult, or is it difficult at all, to balance what your audience wants to see versus your purpose in the space?
Very. It can be so difficult. It can be so difficult. And I think a lot of it comes down to there's just so many needs to balance. Like, I can't tell you how many times I was broke, like 30 cents of my bank account broke. And I would get an email for something that, and this is, while I'm in college,
Yeah.
and I would get an email for something like, oh, do this sponsorship, do this campaign. It's a couple of hundred. And it's like, ooh, do I want to? I sure do. But I just know that this isn't actually going to be good for my brand. Like, for example, I'm going to be collabing with my first alcohol brand. Very excited about that. It's called Ekiano Rum, and it's the first African and Caribbean rum. And that's why I decided that that was going to be my first alcohol collaboration. I have been contacted by a lot of white-owned corporations, and were some of them like drinks that I might have actually drank? Yes, but I didn't feel like it had anything to do with my mission, and I didn't want it to just be a post of, "Hey y'all, it's summer, clink clink, let's drink." Like, no, I wanted it to mean a little bit more than that. And when a brand reaches out to you with not only the room, thank you very much, but when they also ask you to share your story, and the hashtag is my freedom, our story, and they're talking about, why is it celebratory for, Caribbean and African cultures to celebrate with rum, that makes more sense with my brand. I've talked about my culture on my Instagram. I've talked about, what is it and what's important to me and what are my values. It just makes sense. And I think that was something that I've always had to stick to, even when it's very hard, but it's always played out. Like, a lot of the small businesses that I've worked with, I might have done free campaigns for them for a couple of months. And then they came to me and were like, hey, for example, somebody I'm on the board of directors for, I did not charge them for anything at first, like for a couple of months and then they asked me to be on their board of directors, which is going to pay me way more than whatever I was going to charge them for when I first started working with them, which is at the beginning of the pandemic. So it's things like that where, like, I just have a faith that the work that I do is going to pay off because it's something that's intentional and it's value driven and it's something that actually resonates with my mission. And then in terms of how to balance that with my audience, there are certain things that people were asking me for, like, for example, skincare routine. People have been asking me for that for like years. And I was like, I will, but when I get all of my products Black owned. And then as soon as I got into that, that's when I dropped my morning routine. And it's like things like that everybody who's new to my page might not realize, but a lot of people that they've been asking me for a long time. What's the moisturizer? What's the this? What's the that? And it's like, I could give it to you, I'll DM it to you, but I'm not gonna tag that. I'm not, respectfully. Like, because I think it's more important for me to actually be talking about brands that need that support. Like this brand that is on the shelves of Target, me adding them is not doing anything, but me supporting a local DMV brand that just launched by a Black woman, like that's so much more important. So I think a lot of it just goes down to, like, you truly have to know yourself and your intent and your mission. And that's another part that, like, can be hard, but you just gotta be ready to do the spiritual journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point about potentially having to turn down bags in order to continue to live up to your mission, I think is super important. And I know that also some can argue is a place of privilege to be able to turn down a bag, which is 110% true. But I think also it is, two things can be true. I think that it's also true that sometimes you may have to avoid opportunities to get to a bigger one. And somebody, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say his name, but somebody who's on our advisory council with Jude, I was on a call with him, and he's like the CEO of a media company, said that to me the other day. He's a Black person, and I asked him, how do you know when it's time to ask for another raise? Or how do you know when it's time to advocate for yourself? I think is what I said specifically. And I was what he said to me. And although that's not necessarily what I wanted to hear, I was like, oh, okay, like he's not wrong. Like I could ask for this extra bump today or this extra bump in a couple of months, or I can think about what makes the most sense for my career path and what makes the most like and just strategize off of that. So that's definitely a good point that I feel like some people may miss. And I have a follow-up question also to that, because I feel like you also find very niche small business brands that may be hard to find. Are they finding you, or are you doing the research, or both?
So I think that a lot of it, because I do both sides. Like I do like I offer small businesses and solopreneurs marketing and communication strategies and advice. And then I also just do brand ambassador work. So for me, I've kind of gotten into the habit and the cycle of always seeking out new brands in the places that I want to kind of not necessarily dominate, but you know, my niches. Like I understand that a unique part of what brings people to my page is that I have very visually engaging content, because I know how to combine beauty, fashion, and then whatever I want you to pay attention to in the picture. And it's a little bit different than just, you know, just the influencer or the content creator that is like, oh, you know, this is me being cute. Like, no, like I want you to pay attention to the details, because the hair is Black owned, the outfit's Black owned, the makeup's Black owned, the everything's Black owned, and then look at me at this Black owned place. So it's kind of like this unique combo. And I think that a great way for me to answer what you were just talking about in terms of like, when do you ask for the raise, or like when do you ask for the promotion, or when do you figure out if it's like actually something that works for you, is are you creating content that is giving you the audience that you want in the future? Like I would like to think that if somebody saw my page and there were no follower counts and no following counts, that you would think that I had more than I do. And it's like, if you ask somebody who's like interested in like spiritual, they'll talk about like how that's like the law of assumption. Like you just assume the being of somebody who is of a creative, and assume that you are famous, and assume that you are somebody who is going to be featured in even bigger and better publications. You start to take yourself more seriously. And I think that that's something that I would recommend across the board, because even back to just like the advice that I give Black professionals on the rise, like in terms of resume building and cover letter and LinkedIn and interview skills, like you have to enter the room as if you already have the job. And I think that's something that has been something that's always made me stand out in interviews. But it goes beyond that, especially when you're on social media, that is your interview. Like somebody looking at your profile picture is your interview. Somebody looking at your bio is your interview. Somebody clicking your link in your bio and it's broken, now you don't have the job. Now I'm not following. You know? So it's really taking yourself seriously as a business, and taking yourself seriously as like a growing enterprise, if you will, a growing brand, if you want to be a household brand, and figuring out, okay, am I actually doing what I think somebody on that level would do? No. Okay. So I kind of have to change stuff.
Absolutely. Wow. That is such, I never thought about that. Like that being your job interview, as you continue to navigate in this space. How important, and I know that we're coming up on time, so I'll leave it to two more questions. But how important is it for you to be creating opportunities along the way while you're building your own brand, creating opportunities for other Black creatives, women creatives, creatives of color to be in this space?
Extremely. And I think a lot of it, part of it does come from what I've learned as in management, but then a lot of it just comes from when you grow up in New York, when you grow up in the Bronx, when you grow up in a community of color, when you grow up in a family that is, you know, Black, you learn that what is yours has to go to other people. Like we are a very collective community. We are very community based. Like what you have is not just your own, you know, and it's important for you to be passing things down. It's important for you to pass down the knowledge. And that was something that I'm like 8 years old. My grandpa's picking me up from school and he's talking about like segregation. I'm like, Okay. Like I had to be a part of a lot of conversations about like racial injustice. And I'm like, I just want to go get some ice cream, but okay, I'm here for you. I'm listening. But what it kind of turned me into was like always realizing that somebody has to be at the forefront of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think that being a Black woman in media, being a Black person in media, always seeing that I wasn't being represented is what drives me to represent myself so that somebody sees themselves in me. Like even as simple as I remember, and y'all probably remember like Essence magazines and Ebony magazines and all those Black magazines when you were younger, where just the way that they talked about stuff was completely different. It was like, this is what you do so for your man to find you attractive. And these are the sexiest Black women in Hollywood. And I'm looking at it, I'm only 9, but I'm like, okay, I don't look like none of them. So right. I guess I'm not going to be a sexy Black woman in Hollywood one day.
Right.
And it's things like that where it's like, okay, no, change the narrative. Tell yourself that you will be everything that you think that you need to be successful and change the next Black girl's life. So part of that is like cultural, part of that is media driven. And then the part that's management driven is I've just learned that quite literally for you to be deemed somebody who's at the pinnacle of leadership, and this is a management theory, that to get to pinnacle of leadership, it's like 5 levels up. And something that you had to do was you need to train somebody who then was able to train somebody else, who then was able to train somebody else. And if you can't say that, then you're not a leader. And I think that's something that people forget. It goes back to being a content creator and being a successful influencer, that you have to be teaching people things. And it's not just as simple as looking good. And it's not just as simple as being relatable. Like quite literally, what are you leaving people with that is empowering them and giving them the access to something that they didn't previously have? And that's when you start to see that the people that you've taught are teaching other people. And that's things that I'm able to see now. Like the people that I've taught how to do social media management are now teaching the next generation. And I see it in simple things like the organizations that I was in, but like past that, I'm also seeing it in people's mentees and my mentees having mentees, and my mentors now reaching back to me and putting me on their podcast or enrolling me in their classes. And just the constant cycle of pushing it forward is what makes me realize it just has to happen. And on top of that, being an Aquarius, we're human beings. So
absolutely,
I'm always looking out for the good people.
Carmen, did you have something? I know you.
No, I'm honestly, I hope people who are listening to this podcast are taking notes, because I know at the end we always ask our guests, like, what's the advice? And I'm hearing from you, even going back to the beginning of this podcast with like, you know, it's really about skills and like making sure that when you walk into the room that you own it, that you're presenting yourself as if you already haven't, but not in an arrogant way, but just owning what you know. And that's like the biggest thing that you can do for yourself. And my mother always told me that, to the point that like she always like made me feel uneasy about asking for things, because she's one of them people that like she's going to do just a little too much to make you like that makes you like, why are you doing this? But one example is my best friend had one extra ticket to go to her graduation. I'll make this quick, but she had one extra ticket to go to her graduation. My mom was like, we're going. I said, well, I'm going because I have a ticket. She was like, no, we're going, because she's basically my sister. So we went up to the gate and my mom was like, yeah, like I don't have my ticket. Like I'm on the list or whatever you need to check. You know, good and well, she wasn't on nobody's list. And she's like, my daughter is, you know, summa cum laude and I need to be in there. Knowing daggone well that's not her daughter. He was like, oh yes, absolutely. Like you don't just go in. I'm over here with my little ticket. He didn't even check none of our tickets. And she told us, and my best friend came to the family section. She was like, how did you get in? And she was like, you have to walk like you belong. Like I wasn't taking no for an answer. Like I wanted to see you walk, and that's what I'm going to do. Like, so, and we always joke about that. We was like, cause it's Towson. It's a huge school in Maryland. Like, and people were like, not going, parents weren't going because they wanted grandparents to go. Like, so I think that's a strong point. You need to walk like you belong, like you're already in there, and own what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of walking like you belong, Maya, I feel like you're like, for being so young, you're already so centered in like your purpose and like why you're meant to do this work and the ways that you're going to continue to do this work, which I think is super, super dope. And to Carmen's point, I feel like throughout this entire episode, you have continuously dropped gems for anybody who's trying to build their brand, anybody who's trying to do social media management, whether it's for themselves or for a client, anybody that's interested in being the person that's actually creating the content. I feel like you've definitely dropped a lot of lessons that will help them get to the next level, no matter where they're starting. But to end the episode, do you have any additional advice or tips for anybody who wants to be a digital creator, a content creator, or somebody who wants to monetize based off of their own personal brand?
I would say, and this is something that I don't hear enough people talk about, but just like show gratitude. I think that that's something that has uniquely set me apart in terms of like getting the brand deals that I want, getting into the spaces that I want. Like I'm somebody, and I think a lot of this comes back to like me being in business so long, that I'm very, very used to thanking people and like thanking you for the opportunity and thanking you for the time and thanking you for the advice that you might have given, because people don't have to do that. And at the end of the day, people want to feel appreciated. People want to feel like the work that they're doing matters. People want to feel like the time that they spent with you matters. And I'm the person that I'll hit you up with the thank you letter or a thank you card and just see how you're doing. And I think that that's something that even outside of being a digital creator, it's such a great skill set to have in the business world, because that's what's going to keep you in the loop with people. Like even down to my first like big paid brand deal, which was with GoDaddy. I got that because I was like, I didn't know who was on the other side of the chat. I was just like, thank you so much for reaching out to me and inviting me to this campaign. I really do appreciate it. This is the work that I've been doing, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I'm so thankful for this. And just kept the conversation going past what you would usually let it go past when a brand reaches out to you. And then I ended up finding out that I was talking to somebody who went to Hampton University, which is another HBCU. And when I looked at the rest of the campaign and the other people that were featured in the campaign, I was like, I don't think that I would have been included in this otherwise. Like I genuinely don't. And it's not because I didn't have it, but sometimes it really does take that extra thank you and I appreciate you and let's really like build a relationship so that we could actually take this to the next level. So showing gratitude. And with that, thank y'all for having me on your show.
Yes, thank you so much, Maia the Mogul. You're absolutely amazing. Anytime we're together, it's always Maia squared. So I'm so happy that we were able to be Maia squared on Big Fish. That wraps the second episode for season 2, Genius Generation. Make sure that you follow us at Big Fish Pod on all socials. Make sure you follow myself at Maia Macchiato. Carmen, where are they following you at?
At Carmen J. Carroll across all socials.
And Maia, give your handle, please.
Yes, MAIA_melanin, Maia Melanin.
Yes, amazing. Thank you, ladies, so much for spending this night with me, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.